I want to welcome all of you for coming tonight to hear Mary's wonderful presentation on Something's Not Right, Deconditioning the Hidden Tactics of Racism. And Mary, I'm going to read your bio, and then I'm going to get out of the way and let you communicate with us. Mary
Okay.
Turner is a board-certified nurse coach and lifelong activist for racial equality. She is a chapter leader of the AHA Nurse Entrepreneur Chapter, and she also serves on the AHA Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, the DEI Task Force, as well as our HNCC Equality, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Committee. Believing we are all interconnected, no matter where we live in the world, Mary sees the people in our lives as mirrors of ourselves. She is committed to lifelong learning and continuous personal growth and development, tasting international foods, and discovering cultural likes and differences deepens her love and understanding of people from all over the world. She loves to laugh and be around happy people, and I will say that she has phenomenal energy. And I worked closely with her through the HNCC EDI SJBI committee, and it is truly my pleasure. Yes, I know, Teresa. It's like, oh my gosh, a darn acronym. But I will say that when they added belonging, that was something that I thought really was important to that long list of the alphabet soup, because we can do everything we want to include people, but if they don't feel connected, engaged, or like they're belonging, then what good is it? So, Mary, I am going to be quiet now and listen to what you have to say. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, it is my pleasure to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. And before we begin, if it's okay, I'd like to do a quick grounding, if that's okay, because we've worked long hours and to just stay engaged in this conversation, I get that it can be difficult for all the reasons that Margaret mentioned earlier today. And so I want to kind of raise the vibration, if you will. So wherever you are, if you want to turn off your cameras for this, that's fine, or leave them on, or remove your glasses or lower your lids, whatever is comfortable for you. I want to start off by asking you to take a deep, cleansing breath and expand your lungs fully. And as you release the breath, just begin to let go. Let go of all the thoughts and worries and concerns and challenges of your day. Just let it go. Let them dissolve into the nothingness of which they came. And I invite you to bring yourself present right here, right now, nowhere to be. I invite you to remove all distractions. Any thoughts about what you're going to do after the call, just let them go. And as you center into this present moment, I invite you to send loving to yourself, to others that allowed you to be here tonight, to the world, and anyone else. And when you're ready, open your eyes. All right. And I just have one request. If you have your camera off and it's possible for you to turn your camera on, would you mind doing that? Now, if you're driving and you can't, I understand. I love connecting with people. And so when I can actually see the person that I'm talking to, it's a far greater experience. Welcome to tonight's call. And when I thought about the title and what I wanted to say, there's so much inside of me, all, all kinds of thoughts and a history, my life. And I thought, well, what would I say that, first of all, people would get value from? Because you could be so many places tonight, and yet you chose to be here to listen to this conversation. So what could I bring to the conversation that not only would bring value, but you could learn something and maybe even be transformed by it? Maybe take it and apply it in your life. And I decided I'm going to share some stories with you. I'm going to share who I am as a human being, who I am as a Black woman, who I am as a Black nurse. And also let it just be a conversation where we all talk. I think it's all ladies on the call, even. I don't know. Is it all ladies on the call, Mickey? So let's just talk. So the title, and let me make sure I say it correctly. Something's not right. You ever felt like something's not right and you couldn't put your finger on exactly what it was, but you knew something was not right? So I had to put that in there. And then I said, deconditioning the hidden tactics of racism. And I said that I didn't know if I wanted to use deconstructing or deconditioning as a word. And I love the word conditioning because we all know what conditioning is, and we've all been conditioned. If you're a human being, you've been conditioned. If you've done some work, you could have deconditioned. I made that word up. Like a shampoo when you go condition your hair. Well, if you don't condition your hair all the time, it can start getting frazzled and looking really strange and weird. So you have to put that conditioner back on it. And deconditioning, for me, what that means is understanding and knowing that I have, from a very young age, been given information, been taught things, been told things that don't quite fit. Something's not right. And now I have an opportunity, because I'm present to the fact that there is some conditioning. I get to go to work on myself. I call that deconditioning. And it's a lifelong project. And for me, in the beginning, it was very painful to know that I had a bunch of conditioning and I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't say, oh, that's conditioning. Oh, that's conditioning, and then work on that because it's hidden. And racism is one of those things. It's hidden in plain sight. So let me give you an example. And from a very young age. When I was in the second grade, my mom and dad split up. We lived in Chicago, and my mom decided to relocate to Canton, Ohio. And when I lived in Chicago, we lived in the South, on the South side, and it was an all Black neighborhood. The only people I really ever saw, unless I went to the doctor, were Black people. And in this neighborhood, Everybody owned their own business, the daycare center, the cleaners. My mom and dad owned a record shop. The grocery store across the street probably was not owned by Black people, but everything else around my neighborhood was all Black. And because my mom and dad split up and I had to be uprooted and move to Ohio, when we went to school, it was a small little school. I would imagine 200 people. And in my class, I was the only Black person besides a young man. So it was two of us. So you can imagine going from an all Black school, being in an all Black surrounding, to going to an all white school or predominantly white school, being one of the only Black children in the class. And it wasn't really a problem because I had cousins. So I got to go to school with my cousins. They were in other grades and I saw them every day. And even in the classroom itself, that wasn't a problem. The teacher was very nice. She was kind and loving, and she didn't treat me different than she treated anyone else. We had a hayride, and I had never experienced a hayride before. And it was just a truck full of hay, and everybody got on the truck, and you went for a ride, and you talked and laughed and joked. And I just remember I had to be the last one to get on. I didn't even pay it any attention because I'm a kid. I get to get on. And I remember afterwards, we were going to have a dance, and you didn't have to, but you could invite someone to go with you. And in this grade, the one other Black kid in the class, everyone assumed I was supposed to go with him because he was the Black guy. And I remember it was a couple. Uh, and they were known, they were like the favorites in the class, and they were popular and everybody liked them. And they liked me. And they came up to me and they said, "Well, Mary, you know you have to go with Lewis, right? That's who you're going to be coming with." And I just remember thinking to myself, why? Why do I have to go with him? I didn't particularly like him. It wasn't that I didn't like him, but I didn't know that was my only option. And it was given to me. And I wouldn't say that the children in my class that they were racist. They just assumed, for whatever reason, that because I was Black, that my option would automatically be this other Black guy that was in the classroom. And I just said to myself, something's not right. Why is it like this? Why can't I go with Jim or John or Alan? Why is it that the only person that I can go to class with is this one other Black guy? And it sat with me for a very, very long time. And so at the end of the year, my mom said, "Do you all want to stay here at this school, or do you want?" We had moved to a bigger city where there was another school and it was predominantly Black. And she said, "Mary, do you all want to go stay at this school, or do you want to go to the other school?" And we immediately said, "Go to the other school." Now I'm so young and I don't really understand anything. I don't understand racism. I don't understand prejudice, none of it. I've heard different terms. I've seen people fight because of color of their skin, but nobody really talked about it. And I just remember saying to my mom, I want to go to the other Black school because I felt like I would be more comfortable. Not that I was uncomfortable where I was, it was just something's not right. Okay. So I go to the other school, and a year later, I joined the basketball team. And my coach, I loved him. And one day we're having a game, and his wife shows up, and she ends up being the teacher that was in the classroom. And when she sees me, we both smile at each other. And we're smiling because the last day that I was there, I write a letter because she was the type of teacher you could share anything with her. She made you feel so open and welcome. And we had a box where you could put any thoughts you had on paper and then put it in a locked box. And she was the only one who had access to it. And I'll paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know how I felt. I said it was an experience being in the classroom. I really enjoyed everybody that was there, but I always felt like an outsider. And I shared with her the conversation where it was expected because I was Black that I would automatically be paired with another Black, the only other Black male in the class. And I didn't understand it. And I didn't feel completely accepted, even though everybody was nice to me. And she came up to me and she just wrapped her arms around me. And she said, Mary, I don't understand it either, but I'm so glad that you shared it because I read that letter to everyone in the classroom and they cried. They cried because that was the first time I think they ever realized that they had a thought that just because you're Black, you pair with Black people, and if you're white, you pair with white people. We can go to school together. We just don't mix. Not one of them had ever asked me to come to their house or do anything personal. While we were in school, we could talk, we could laugh, but they went their way and I went my way. So fast forward, let me give you another example. I'm a nurse now, and before I actually came out of the Air Force, I decided I wanted to be a neonatal ICU nurse. And so I got a lot of training in the Air Force, but I was a med tech for most of that. And now I'm in the civilian sector and I'm in San Antonio and I'm at a hospital. And I have a preceptor and she's a nice enough lady. And every single time I made a mistake, because we're humans, we all make mistakes, right? I noticed that she did what I call violent thinking. Have you ever heard the term before, violent thinking? And she did it out loud. So violent thinking is something that happens internally for most individuals. See, we treat ourselves a certain kind of way. Most of us treat ourselves very abusively. We would never say some of the things that we say to ourselves to another human being. So let me give you an example. Have you ever heard yourself say something like, and this is an example that I like to use because you can see it from a perspective of a female. When you're going out of town and you're packing all of your stuff and you realize that you forgot your mascara, your favorite mascara, do you say, I just forgot my mascara, no big deal? Or do you say, oh, how stupid am I? How could I possibly? Now, this is all internal dialogue. Which one are you? By a show of hands, are you the type of person that you say, oh, I just forgot my mascara? Do you go into this, I really can't stand myself. Why did I do this again? Oh, I'm so stupid. That's called violent thinking. And as it happens, the more that we are conditioned into not loving ourselves and not being our true, authentic selves, the more violent thinking we have. And so she had violent thinking whenever it came to anything that I did wrong. The other nurse who joined at the exact same time as me, and she was a white nurse and she had absolutely no experience. I was a nurse and I had plenty of experience, but as a med tech, I knew how to do most of the things that she shared with me. Maybe not the way that particular hospital did it, but I had a solid foundation, right? So she would say things to me like, you know better than doing it like that. How come I have to tell you this again? Why do I have to keep showing you this over and over again? You didn't document it the way that I showed you. And the other nurse, she would say, well, that's okay. I know this is your first time doing, and she didn't even care if I heard what she was saying. And I don't think that she was doing it intentionally. I think it was within her subconscious and it was in her fabric. It was like a suit that we wear. Like when we get up in the morning and we put on clothes, we don't think anything about it. We know we're not going to leave the house naked, right? Or when we get up in the morning and we go brush our teeth, it's just what we do. It's a routine. And that's how her behavior was. It was violent thinking out loud. It was so abusive that when she got ready to speak to me, even her look was fearful. I was afraid to look at her. Just the look terrified me. Needless to say, I didn't stay there very long. Another example, and believe me, when I tell you that I love neonatal ICU nursing, and to have to leave where I was a sad day. At the time, I hadn't done as much work on myself that I have now. That would have been a very different conversation. And I would not have allowed another individual to force me out, right? I just wouldn't have. And even when I was in the Air Force, I was taking all of these classes because they offered a lot of different classes for free. And I've been a lifelong learner. Anytime there's something new, I'm like a sponge. I want to learn it. I want to figure it out. It's probably why I'm on the DEI task force. You know, I'm a part of everything. And when I'm a part of something, I give 100%. And so I'm in the Air Force and I'm taking one class after another. And my supervisor comes up to me and he says, Major Khan, that was her name. Major, no, it wasn't Khan. I can't think of her name, but she was a beautiful lady and she was married to a Black man and had beautiful kids. And she said, why is Mary taking all of these classes? I just don't understand it. Why is she always signing up for stuff? And we had about 5 or 6 other white people signing up for everything too. But I was the only one that she wanted to know why. Now, does that mean that she's racist? No, it doesn't mean that she's racist. It does mean that she made a distinction between what I was doing and what everyone else was doing. Was it that she felt like I was too young in my career to be taking all these classes? Did I already have too much on my plate? I don't know. So I can begin to question all of these things, or I can begin to say, what other people think about me is not my business, because I love to learn and I'm going to learn. And if there's an opportunity for me to learn, I'm going to take advantage of it. And so once I took that on, I was able to take that layer of conditioning. That's called what I call deconditioning. I was able to take that layer off. And what that means is whenever I'm in a conversation with anybody about anything and they're telling me anything about myself, I can say, thank you for sharing. It doesn't penetrate anymore. I don't walk away feeling scarred or less than or unworthy. So I'm in a conversation many years later. I'm very young. I think I'm 26 or 27 years old. And I'm in an interview with this wonderful executive nurse. And she hires me for the director position for healthcare recruitment for their hospitals in Texas and Louisiana. And I don't need to say the name of the company. They're a big, large healthcare organization. And when she hires me on, I'm the first Black female that has ever been in a director role of this nature in their whole organization, ever. And so I go out to the store and I buy these beautiful suits. I'm C-suite now, y'all. I'm an executive. I have a beautiful office. Not only do I have an office at one of the locations, one of the floors in another building, I have the entire floor. What I need the whole floor for, I do not know, but it's very fancy and upscale and very nice. So I have two offices. My boss is in Dallas. So I don't have anyone that sees me on a day-to-day basis that I report to. However, four of the CNOs at the area hospitals I'm accountable to, which means I'm responsible for making sure they have enough nursing staff for all of their units at each of their hospitals. That's my responsibility. It's also my responsibility when they get ready to terminate somebody that I do the documentation. And so I schedule a meeting to meet with these ladies. And we're in a room with a beautiful conference table, and we're sitting around the table, and the first CNO walks up to me and she looks me up and down. I'm dressed to kill, y'all. And she said, "How on earth did you get this job?" That's what she said to me. "How on earth did you get this job?" I said, "Well, somebody thought I was qualified, I guess." And by the way, I did own the third largest staffing agency in the city of Houston. Maybe that's why. I don't know. And it bothered me, but I let it roll off. But it was a high stress environment because what they had is what I call the good old girl network. You've heard of the good old boy network before. This was the good old girl network in action. They did every possible thing that you could do to another human being to make them feel like the bottom of the earth, scum. And it wasn't really a whole lot that they could do to get me fired because my boss and I had already had a very detailed, in-depth conversation about the position that I was in and possibly some of the things that I would encounter. So I was somewhat prepared. You can never prepare for someone to walk up to you and tell you nasty things like, "Oh, I bet you won't be here in a year." I was walking down the hallway and one of the CNOs had shared with another nurse manager that I was the new person in the role. And she walked up to me and said, "I bet you won't be here in a year." That's what she said to me as I was walking by. And I said, "I wonder why you would think that." And she just kept going. And I wasn't. I promised myself when I took on that role that if I found myself to be in a situation that I felt like it was stressful or wasn't serving me, that I would leave immediately. And that's exactly what I did. So, how did I get where I am today? And what do I do when I find myself in difficult situations or challenging situations where someone is looking at the color of my skin, or as Martin Luther King said, instead of the color of my skin, instead of them looking at the content of my character, instead of someone looking at my heart, what I bring to the table. What I do in those moments is, quite honestly, I say a silent prayer for them. And even before I got on the call today, Lord, speak through me. Use me in some kind of way, whatever words that I say, allow those words to penetrate the hearts of the listener so that they hear whatever it is that they need to hear, and allow me to come from love. Am I going to allow somebody to beat me up and spray me down with a water hose? No, but I think what I can do is I can understand that that person has their own issues, their own challenges, and it's never about me. It's never about me. It's always about them and the work that they've done or the work that they have refused to do for whatever reason. And so I went to Landmark Education. And I don't know if you're familiar with Landmark Education, but it's ontological learning. And ontological learning has to do with the study of being. We are human beings. We do a lot, And so we probably should call ourselves human doings. But when we step into the world of being, who I'm being right now is bold. Who I'm being right now is a Black woman and proud of it. Who I'm being is Mary Turner. Who I am is a catalyst for life transformation. And what that means is when I meet somebody in my experience, when people hang out with me, they transform. And so I was on Zoom, not Zoom, I was on Facebook Messenger. And this was when George Floyd was first murdered by the police. There was a lot of hard feelings. It was, emotionally, it was very stressful for both Black, white, China, for everybody. If you're a human being and you witness somebody be murdered in that way, especially if you're a nurse and you saw life leave this man in the manner in which it did, it had to affect you if you're a human being, right? And so I'm in this chat, and this chat is going back and forth, and what's happening is everyone is feeling like they need to defend themselves. So the white lady is like, why are you blaming me for all of this? And the Black lady is like, because it's your fault. And they're going back and forth. And it's a conversation that is not productive at all. And so I simply type in, I can understand the perspective of both sides. And basically, this is not an issue that can be solved here in a chat. It has to be an experience where people get together and say what's so for themselves. But most of the time, when people are in conversations because of their conditioning, they are afraid to say how they truly feel, what they really mean. And so, because it's so, I call it fake, we don't get anywhere because people won't tell what they really mean unless they're saying it to somebody who doesn't really have a need to know it. And that's about everything, not just racism. If you're have at odds with a coworker and you go tell their friend or you go tell someone other than that person, it's going to be pretty challenging to resolve the situation. And sometimes you'll find that what you thought is not exactly what actually happened until you do have a conversation. I had a conversation today with a young lady, and she said, Mary, I think you just need to find somebody to replace me. This is my program manager. And I said, really, why? Are you not enjoying what you're doing anymore? And she said, no, I really enjoy it. And I said, well, do you operate from a space of excellence or do you operate from a space of mediocre? And she says, well, I operate from a space of excellence. And I said, well, that's the only thing I could ever ask, is that you operate from a space of excellence. And she said, well, you're just so direct. You say things, and I wasn't raised that way. And I just can't be that direct with people. And I said, well, right now we're having a conversation and there's something in our space. And until we get that cleaned up, we're going to continue to bump into problems. So whatever it is, let's talk about it. Let's get all the cards out on the table. And she said, well, what do you mean in our space? And I said, let's say I'm standing here and you're standing here. There's something in between us. And whatever that is, we need to remove it so we can stand face to face and be able to say whatever it is that needs to be said. And she said, well, you are able to wear all these different hats. And when I tell you I need something done, you go ahead and you do it, or sometimes you don't do it. But when I do something or I forget to do something wrong, you always say something about it, and that becomes the center of focus. I said, okay, well, we need to slow that down right there. And I repeat it We call it a double click. I repeated exactly what she said. It becomes the focus of your attention. I said, so are you telling me when you do something wrong, it becomes the focus of my attention, or is that just a thought? And she said, well, it becomes the focus of your attention. I said, so when I said in the last email, perfect, or I say you're doing an amazing job, or this is awesome, do you consider that being the focus of your attention? And she says, well, you do say that, but I guess, every now and then when you do correct me on something, I take it and I focus on it. And I said, good, but you don't need to focus on it, because when you do something great, I'm going to tell you. And when you do something and it's not so great, I'm going to tell you as well. I'm going to tell you both, because the one thing I will do is hold you accountable. Are you up for that? And she said, I am, because I want to do my best. And I said, so what's the problem? And she said, so when I asked you to send me the date, so we had an instructor and they needed a date and I didn't respond. I said, well, 7 days later, what was there for you to do? And she said, well, I waited and then I let you know. And I said, well, what does our policy say? Our policy is that if someone sends an email, it's a 24-hour turnaround. I said, that includes me as well. So in that role, I'm the instructor. You're the program manager. She said, well, I'm used to working with people where I'm over them, but I'm not used to somebody being over me and then I hold them accountable. And I said, well, in this particular case, I am the instructor. I'm the CEO. I said, but I'm also an instructor because that's the hat I'm wearing. And it's difficult to be able to distinguish different hats in an organization, and it's challenging. I said, but are you willing to practice? Because one thing I know for sure is that when we begin to practice things, we get better. So if I practice allowing someone to be okay, even if I know they don't like me because of the color of my skin, and I practice still being nice and caring and loving, I get better at it. Just like if she practices bringing things to me, and she can even be uncomfortable with it, but if she still brings it to me simply because that's her responsibility, she'll get better. Those are tough conversations. That's like me talking to you, Mickey, saying, Mickey, I want something done like this, and you're the owner, but I'm on the task force. I feel free, like I can say any and everything that I want to say, because I know, number one, there's no judgment. I know that I'm completely accepted. I know that you love me. And I appreciate that. Everybody doesn't feel that way. So let me give you another example. I told you earlier about the terrible thing that happened with George Floyd. I couldn't sleep for about a week. And what I did was I went on Facebook and I posted the video, and I was intentional. Every white person that was a friend of mine, I sent them that video. And the next morning, I got a phone call. It was about 7 a.m. in the morning. And it's from a person, I don't need to say their name, but he's famous. And he called me up on the phone, and we talked on the phone for about 2 hours. We laughed together, we cried together. And then he helped me put together a strategy so in Houston we could have a march. And then I got in my car and I drove to Minnesota. This would have never happened without this gentleman's help. And I drove to Minnesota and I did the march there and rally and, partake. I partook in all of the activities, and on the drive home, I'm almost back. I'm in Dallas. And as I'm driving, I look in my rearview mirror and there's this car weaving in and out. He's flying. Now the traffic is Sunday. The traffic's going about 70 anyway. It's flowing. And when he pulls behind me, he loses control of his vehicle and he hits the median. And when he hits the median, he bounces back into me driver's side. My car goes flowing to the other side of the highway. I cross over 3 lanes of traffic and my car is totaled. I walk away scot-free. And when I get out of my car, This man runs up to me and he says, I saw the whole thing and I can tell the police and blah, 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 blah. About 20 minutes later, I'm standing on the side of the road. My car is in front of me, and behind me are 3 or 4 rows of police officers, 3 cars, and they're standing out there on the highway. And it's 7 white police officers. And I walk over to them and I say, there are no accidents in the universe. Obviously, we need to talk. And they look at me like, what the hell is this? And I said, I understand you must be under a tremendous amount of stress with everything that's going on with George Floyd. How is it for you? And the police officer, he says, now, mind you, people are getting out of their cars, white people, recording. They have decided they are no longer going to allow Black people to be made examples of like George Floyd by police. And they're recording. They got my back, right? And this police officer says, you see what's going on here? We can't do anything. He says, when I put on this uniform, I'm a target. People are looking at me a certain kind of way. As soon as I walk into a certain place, people are staring me down. And I said, sir, Black people have been dealing with that for over 400 years. And I said, so you see this? This color of my skin makes me an automatic target. When I walk into the store, sometimes people follow me around thinking I'm going to steal something. When I'm walking down the street, people cross to the other side of the street just so they don't have to pass me. And after a few minutes of us going back and forth, he literally starts to cry. And he was like, for the first time in my life, I can understand and I can see what you go through. I'm experiencing it now. And what I got present to was, even in the middle of everything that was going on with George Floyd, the whole activity around it, the world woke up. Not just the people in the United States, the world woke up and said, something's not right. What I got present to was, even through all of that, I had enough humility and care for police officers, because it could not feel good to have to put on that uniform every day in the midst of all of that. And they weren't, those police officers that were in front of me weren't the ones that put their knee on George Floyd's neck. But yet people were looking at them differently. People were recording. And yes, we need to do something about police reform. Yes, we need to talk about it. And yet those particular individuals may have been completely different. Maybe they weren't the type of people that would stop somebody just because of the color of their skin. I've been stopped, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 times in my life by police officers simply because I was driving while Black. I was driving one time I was in Arkansas, and a police officer pulled me over. And at the time, my fiance was sitting beside me, and he separated us. He never told us why he was stopping us. He wanted to search my vehicle. And at the time I was traveling, I was going to do a CPR instructor course, because I own an American Heart Association training center, and I have instructors all over the US. And I was actually going to do a class, and I was driving there. I don't even know what state I was driving to, but I was in Arkansas. And he completely violated our rights. And my fiance answered every question. He asked him what he did for a living, how old he was. He verified we were who we said we were, and our relationship was what we said it was. And then he eventually let us go. I had a police officer stop me here in Houston, and he told me I was speeding, and I probably was. And when he asked for my driver's license, he pulled out his gun because I had a concealed handgun license and pointed it at me and said, "Where's your gun? Where's your gun?" I said, "I don't even have my gun in the car with me. I don't have it." He was operating out of fear. I was just speeding. Um, and I can tell you a lot of other stories about different incidents and things that that have happened to me. But at the end of the day, I have to live in the United States of America, or I choose to. I choose to live here. And I know I live in a country where I would even say most people, white people, love me. They love me. It's just a small percentage of people who have been raised since they were this high to hate people simply because of the color of their skin. They don't even know why, what the significance means. So am I going to let a small percentage of people, maybe 1%, affect my day-to-day life, stop me from voting, erase history out the books, pretend like things didn't happen that really happened? No, I'm going to continue to live my life. And those people who want to get to know me on a human level, those individuals who want to interact with me simply because I resonate with them and they resonate with me for no other reason, that's what I'll do. And as long as I live, I will always be a stand for right action, which means if I see somebody being treated unfairly, I don't care what their color is, I'm going to say something, because something is not right when a human being is being mistreated by another human being. All right, I only have a few more minutes. So what I want to do, I want to open it up. I want to open it up for questions, and not just any question, but a tough question, one that you've always wanted to ask and was afraid to ask. And before I take a question, I want to say this. And this is to give you permission to say whatever you want to say. It's okay. I know you hear a lot of talk about Black women and Black hair. That's a new thing going around. Um, Black women have been stigmatized about, we've been stigmatized about our hair for so long. When I was in the Air Force, I got a 341 pulled on me. And if you're military, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's where they pull a negative slip. It's where you get written up simply because you weren't following a rule or a guideline. And at the time, I had 2 French braids in my hair. And one of the little pigtails was sticking out. And in the Air Force, your hair had to be neat. And it was extremely neat, except for that little pigtail. And the only reason why he did it was because he felt like we should not have braids in our hair, he told me. Up until that point, I only had 2 days left and I hadn't gotten any. So you can imagine how disappointed I was. And I was just a kid. So I think that we have to deal with that as Black people to get that stigma off of us. Some of us wear long weaves, and I love weave. Don't get me wrong, I still wear them. This is an added hair. You know, my hair is probably about right here. The rest of this is added on. And when I wash my hair, it gets really kinky. And I have to blow dry it out or use a hot comb if I want it straight. And a lot of that came about because we wanted to be accepted. Because for so long, mostly white men couldn't accept us when our hair didn't look like a white woman's hair, long and flowing and all of that. And to add to that, I really don't mind. Now, I'm different than a lot of Black women. So all Black women are not created the same. We don't all think alike. We're all different, just like white women. So I don't put people in a box. So I know it sounded like it today because we're talking about racism, but if I did, let me take you out. Nobody's in a box. It's not this group and that group. It's human beings, it's individuals. You can absolutely come up to me and touch my hair. That's what I wanted to say. I was in the Air Force, I was in the Philippines, and they would come up to me and they would be mesmerized. They would want to touch my skin and my hair. I'm like, go ahead. Okay. Now you can't do that with every Black person. They don't want it. But you can absolutely touch my hair. You can, because we're curious. We're human beings. It's different. And we want to experience it. It doesn't make a person, in my opinion, a hater. It doesn't make somebody racist. Is if they just notice something that's different and unique and they want to experience it. And I'm okay with that.
Mary, Rhonda's had her hand up, but what I want to comment really very quickly about is it makes us human beings when we're seen as individuals. It makes us very human, but we just have to ask. My sister was totally offended when she was pregnant that people would go up and rub her belly. Me? You can rub away. So I think it's that never making the assumption that somebody is who they are because of their color, because how they wear their hair, because of how they think, because of their religion. And Rhonda,
Yes.
you're on.
Thank you so much for that, Mary. Yeah, I loved your stories. My question was because I have, I faced this, a lot of things that you have talked on personally. And I thought maybe you was like, oh my God, this should peep into my life already. Uh, and my question is because since we are dealing with racism, how do you deal with or tell a story about or give me some helpful if you know uh, nuggets, golden nuggets, because it's not only the opposite other races, right? That's always discriminating or giving you stories to tell like you have. Lately, I have been finding that my own race, the Black race,
Mhm.
have been more oppressive to me lately in the past couple of years than other races. So, how do you deal with that? Can,
That's a really, really good question. I heard somebody else say something. Okay, so it's a really, really good question. And what I do right now is I'm a nurse coach, right? And every time I have an opportunity to coach with another Black person, I want to, because we have so much conditioning on us. It's been scientifically proven that it's in our DNA. The things that happened through slavery have been passed down so much so that it's in us. And if we're not willing to do the work to heal it, we continue to pass that on. Now, there's a book. It's called, oh gosh, it's such a good book. Joy. If anybody knows who I'm talking about, please say her name. But she talks about this whole thing where we as Black people, we hate each other because we've been taught to hate each other. We've been taught to hate ourselves since slavery, since and way before Jim Crow. And it was strategic. It was designed to be that way so that we would fall in line and be obedient, if you will. And so now that we're no longer, well, in our minds, I'd say we're still enslaved, but we're not physically enslaved, but mentally our minds are. And if we're not willing to do the work, the hard work, and when I say hard work, that means go get you some therapy, go get you some counseling, go get you a coach and talk about some of those things that are so deep inside of you that you can't even see it yourself. We all could use some of that. And so when I'm dealing with somebody and I see they're in their stuff, I display love as much as I possibly can. And love looks different depending on the situation, because I believe in tough love as well. And so if I'm dealing with another Black person, I'll be direct because I'm direct anyway. But I'll just say, Do you realize what you're saying isn't driving us toward a goal of happiness, of love, of peace? That you're actually our tearing us down. And I really do believe that we are mirrors for people. And when somebody is in front of us, it's a lesson to be learned. And our job is to look for it. And so that's what I do. Did that help, Rhonda?
Yeah, that did. That helped immensely. It's kind of hard when you're in a such stressful situation, and more or less they're arguing and or yelling, and you just like, okay, well, I can walk away, or I can just be silent like I normally do, and eventually they will, pipe down, and then I'll revisit it at a different time. But how many times I have to go through it is, I think, more frustrating with me, for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that it would be frustrating because you're looking at it
I
from
have
the
to,
perspective as this is a Black person doing
yeah,
it
I
to
have to
you.
keep on
And
saying I'm
maybe
not.
most of the people that you surround yourself with are Black people. And so you're going to have those kind of encounters if you spend most of your time with Black people. What would
No,
happen?
it's actually opposite. I understand that. I mean, I have said to them, I'm not here for comparison. I'm not trying to compete against you, because it's always, oh, you think you're something, oh, you got your doctoral degree now, and I'm like, oh my God. I try to be as humble as possible and let them know that, I'm not going to shy down because I got my doctoral degree, but I don't go flaunting it. I say, you don't see me going around saying, call me doctor or anything like that. I was like, I'm not in here for competition or comparison. I'm here to make friends. I'm here to let this work environment be pleasant and peaceful and productive, right? So that seemed to be my, I think other co-workers can recite that before I can recite it. And then if I, you know, have conversation or engage and collaborate with other races, then I want my race card get pulled. Your Black race card is being pulled. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, at sometimes, I do just be alone in my own office and just like, well, and I'm like, okay, I got to find better alternatives. So
Yeah.
it happens,
Yeah.
but you just
And repeat
get
after me,
stressful.
Rhonda. What other people think about me
What other people think about me,
is not my business.
it's not my business.
And write that down.
Oh, I will. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rhonda, I want to say thank you for bringing that up because I've had conversations. I'm white, obviously, and I've had conversations with colleagues and friends. And one of the things that we tend to do as human beings is I mean, judgment goes way, way back to trying to figure out if it's friend or foe. And Mary, I love the conditioning and the idea of putting a suit on and saying, wait a minute, the suit doesn't fit. I want a different suit, or I want a different color, or I want to wear it differently.
Yeah.
Um, because we forget that we're dealing with people. We're dealing with an individual. And so I had somebody who is very actively involved, who's white, in the Black Lives Matter. And she said to me, they're never going to trust you. You're white. They can't be honest with you. They can't trust you. And their colleagues are thinking that if they're with you or talking to you or sharing a laugh, that either they're not being honest with me or they're traitors to their people. And
Hmm.
I found it very unsettling, but also very offensive in the sense that judgments were being made by my colleagues or my friends who have shared it a lot with me, that the assumption was because they were Black, all Black people think alike, show up the same way, have the same suit on. And so, Rhonda, I really appreciate you bringing that up because ultimately, Mary, you've been talking about connecting on a spiritual level. And it is, when we start making the assumption, and I have to say, my world really changed when I watched that video on George Floyd. It's
Mhm.
not that I wasn't aware of it. It wasn't that I hadn't been involved and had friends of with much diversity, but it was a real wake up call to me. And I've learned over the last several years how much I didn't even know, how much had my blinders on. So I appreciate this conversation. And one of the questions somebody asked in the chat was asked if you would talk about the difference between the term Black American versus African American and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's like every 20 years it changes. I remember when it was Negroes. So the way that I was taught is if you say I'm a black person, that means I could be Jamaican descent, or I could, I'm black, no matter where I'm from. If you say I'm African American, typically what they're saying is they're African descent, but they were born in the United States. So we have a lot of people who come here, they weren't born here, or maybe even they were born here, but their families were primarily born somewhere else, and they don't consider themselves African American. And it just depends on who you talk to. You can call me either one, because it's not what you call me, it's who I am.
You're not gonna put somebody else's suit on just because they're throwing it at you.
I mean, it's just a title at the end of the day.
And Teresa Fadley stated she remembered people being colored, but I mean,
Yeah.
are we not all colored? It's just how you know. It's that I remember the story. It was a book about um, God making people, and the white people he took out too early, and the black people were too dark, but the Hispanic were just right. And I remember thinking, well, that didn't make any sense to me. And so, I think I really resonate with what you said. Lori Rose has a question for you.
Yes.
This is more like a comment on the Black American thing. I'm just on a horse these days. We're all Americans, so why isn't it American Black, American Irish, American Haitian?
Yes.
So I want to put it out there that we all here can start changing our language.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
For
you.
sure, because language is so important anyway. How we language things can change the whole meaning of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great point.
Any
other Shika? What is your point of view?
Well, I'm just laughing over here. I'm agreeing with all these stories. I remember being told about the oven thing, like for white people versus black people being in the oven longer. And I just thought that was the craziest thing. I do personally identify myself as black up until recently. I did trace my ancestry. So I did confirm I am from Nigeria. So I now acknowledge that and I do say that, but growing up, I didn't like to use that term African American. It just bothered me. And it was more so because of the learning about the history of slavery. I had all of this built up anger and I just didn't want to associate with that. And so I kind of put it out of my life until recently. I've started to bring it back in. And I've had multiple situations with different experiences throughout my work life, throughout school, growing up. Like you, I went from an all Black school to a more diverse school and then back to an all Black school. So I've gotten the opportunity to become more diversified in my life and put race, I can't say out of my mind, but like just I have a totally different perspective and appreciation for who I am. And I try to stick to that and not take things personally so that I'm not angry, because I was very angry for a very long time after learning about my history and slavery and how we got here. And it was just very difficult for me. So once I got past all of that, it's just something I haven't wanted to go back to. I deal with a lot with my husband now, he's from Brooklyn, from East New York. And so when he moved to Georgia, where we live now, and had to um, accept other races in his life a little bit more now that he deals with me, I got to see the difference between, somebody who holds on to racism or holds on to the fear of being Black versus me, who I try to be more open-minded. But I also know I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And I'm still having to deal with it. And currently, as you can see, my hair, I'm going through the hair transformation. My hair used to be long down to here. It was very beautiful. I used to keep it straightened and pressed because I that's what, I kind of identify with. It was easier for me. But then I sweat a lot in my head. So I used to have to constantly keep pressing it back out. And then I just learned to just embrace my curl pattern and be happy with it. And it's been very freeing. I did locks for 2 years. I just cut them. And thank you. And so I don't know, I'm working through the struggle now. Sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, oh my gosh, like my face is too fat and this hair doesn't fit me, and like I miss my hair but I have to get past those things. So literally everything that you talked about, I've gone through it. I'm going through it. And like you said, I love your quote. I had to write it down because I'm gonna reuse that. What other people think about me is not my business. And you're so right. Like I've been saying that to myself, just not knowing I've been saying that to myself. And that has helped me to maintain my happiness and to not be so affected by certain things. But I appreciate the conversation because, like I said, we can't get away from it.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah. And what helped me also was I did the racial healing circle. That helped me to see my own biases because I have a bunch, and I'm able to kind of remove those layers too. Yeah. Somebody had a hand up.
Candace does.
Okay. Oh, and Teresa.
I'm trying to get oh, here it is. Hold on. Trying to start the video.
That's it. Oh.
There it is. Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed listening to you, Mary. I have 1,000 thoughts, which is always hard for me to put in a nice little paragraph here. I have a disability. And so I have faced discrimination through my lifetime. And discrimination is discrimination. And discrimination means treated differently. That's what discriminate as a verb means. And I choose to call people on it. I think that's what will make things change. I think that's what will change biases. It tells the truth, my truth. And I think it's important that we speak. Anyone being treated differently has permission to speak on their behalf or someone else's behalf, different than the silence, which gives approval. So I choose to speak. And I'm a nurse, and I've been a nurse almost 50 years. So you can imagine that a nurse with a visible disability of no left hand was really questioned about her reason for wanting to be a nurse and discriminated against.
Yeah.
Somehow, always, there were people in my life who came forward and advocated for me. So another word I like to keep at the forefront is advocacy. Who are the people advocating for you? Not for the masses, but for the individual. Because until we treat all of these isms, ageism and on down the list, until we speak to them and find the individual story within the isms of all the isms, then it's not getting to the root of change.
Yeah.
And I believe that individuals is what will make not having someone in my life and be working with them, loving them, being with them, being neighbors, however it is that they're in my life, whatever the roles are. I believe that's what will move things forward.
Yeah.
And the other thing I hold in my intention when it comes to particularly race is that someday, and I don't know when this will happen or if it can happen, because I listen or read or watch news every day, and around the world, racism is horrible. So my vision, and I hold this as intentional vision, is that the word race will not exist anymore, because we will all have married and married and married, or
Right.
partnered or partnered or partnered, or had babies, have babies, have babies. We're all the same.
We are.
And we will all be the same race, which will be the human race, which you.
Yes.
And so I hold that vision, and that everyday steps can be taken to that, toward that. Now, the last thing I want to say is I grew up in.
Meeting? I'll stand with
your background noise.
Well, I love you.
I grew up in Illinois, outside of Chicago, in a little farming community. And there was not one person other than a white person that I ever knew until I went to college, because that was the community. But I was taught, not with words, but with behavior, I was taught to be accepting, to accept difference.
Yeah.
I was just taught that. That is the life I lived. So I that's my comment. Those are my comments.
Candace, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, and it's very valuable. And I acknowledge you too for just being able to say what's so. Race is a construct that was built by a group of men who wanted to keep, that goes back in history. Everybody probably knows that lesson. No need to share it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Mary,
Lori, we have one other person, Lori.
Well, you have also Teresa, then Lori.
Oh, okay. I'm here. I know, for those of you who have to get off, I understand. And for those of you who are willing to stay, that'd be great.
Okay. I have so many things to say to you, but I really, truly do have a question.
Rhonda, mute yourself, Rhonda.
I'm sorry.
No, not you.
Yeah.
It's the other Rhonda Kane.
Can you please mute if you're not speaking, because this is being recorded? Thank you.
Okay. Teresa.
Are we there? Okay. Well, I have so many comments to make that I could, but we'd be here for 10 more minutes, because Mickey knows that but I do have a question. I have the two most beautiful little biracial granddaughters that you could ever lay eyes on. And they've done well with it. When I was growing up, if a white woman married a black man, and it was never the other way around, which now you see, the children were automatically black. And so my daughter was like, no, they're biracial. That they're not black, they're not white.
Right.
And so my question to you is, how have you seen that over the course of your life? I mean, we all deal with it fine. I mean, the girls are fine. They, my oldest granddaughter, the other day, my daughter was combing her hair out, and they wear braids and they get the little, I don't know if they're corn, I don't know what they are, but her hair is beautiful when she has it done. They both have got gorgeous hair. Jessica was trying to arrange Jalen's hair, get it. She just washed it. She goes, and Jessica was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe all this." And she goes, "Mom, it's your fault you married a black man. And you knew when you did that my hair wasn't going to be right." So, they just are like all kinds of, I mean, I could go on and on stuff that they say. And we have felt some racism and discrimination. We lived in Charlottesville. I lived there when the I don't know, the big kerfuffle, and this is what I call it, the man that lived in the White House at the time and all that mess. And I took care of patients that were in those riots in Charlottesville the next day. And it was tough. We were locked in the hospital. It was tough. And but anyway, my question is, how have you handled people, because we felt it, like I said before, we go to Charlottesville and people would look at my husband and I, and then look down at the girls and look back up, and it just sometimes would do everything I could do to keep from saying, "Is there a problem?" But we've always refrained from that to keep the girls from noticing a difference. We want them to grow up as they're just human beings. They're not black, they're not white, they're just who they are. They're Jalen and Jaleesa. How have you handled that with children or with people close to you who their children are biracial and they're confused and wonder what's going on, and people looking at them and scratching their heads at when they're with their so-called white grandparents? Who the hell knows what we are? I mean, you start getting in those European mixes and holy hell, it's everything. So that's my question.
My best friend, she's married to a white guy, and they have 3 children. She had 2 children with a black guy before she got with him. And he had 1 son with another white woman. And they're all one big happy family. And I love them.
Yeah.
They have the best life. They really do. And she had a conversation with them because one day they were saying, "Well, I'm white." And she said, "No." And she had to sit them down and say, "You're white and you're black, because I'm black and your dad is white." But they don't encounter a lot of racism. They live in a predominantly white neighborhood. And they go to a predominantly white school.
Yeah.
And they were in the military. So, in the military, you see a lot of it anyway. And they weren't exposed. They have never been exposed to anything that was really harmful where they felt like an outsider or anything, thank God. And I find that that doesn't really happen the younger generation. Now, my mom, her father was white and her dad was black. And my stepmom, my dad remarried.
Okay, I'm like,
and so she experienced a lot. And she has dementia. So she talks about a lot of that right now. And she cries. But I don't think our younger generation, they're not tolerating it. Most of these young people, they've had enough. They're not going to do this crazy stuff that we did or we allowed to happen. And then even just to touch on what was said earlier that Candace said, until we, it's easy to speak up until it's time to speak up. It takes a lot of courage. And then sometimes when you speak up, you can be ostracized or blacklisted or be made to be the bad person, because most people don't want racism. They don't want hatred, but most people won't stand up and say it. Let me mind my business. Let me stay out of it. I don't want anything to do with it. And so it perpetuates because we don't have enough people standing up for right action, because most people don't want anything.
Mary, mold grows in dark, damp places, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think,
Lori has a question. Teresa, I'm sorry. Was there something else you wanted to say?
Oh, just one other comment that probably would resonate. And sometimes I have trouble saying this, but my son-in-law was in a class or something, and I'm not sure what it was about, an interview maybe. And they asked him if there was one thing he could eliminate in the world, and he said racism. And I resonate with that. That's me. If there's anything, it's just discrimination, period, whether it's color or not. But of all the things in the world that he could change, that was the one thing that he wanted. And I'm doing my part. I have biracial grandchildren, and so we're trying to mix it up. We're not going to see it for a while. It's going to be, and it's going to take some time. But I've done my part.
Teresa, I read somewhere, I want to say it was 2020, that this country tipped in 2020 that the minority is white. And it's about time because diversity is the beauty, is the strength, it's the character of this country.
Yes.
And so it's happening.
Yeah, it has in California, just pure population. Yeah.
We need some of that in Texas, but I won't say anymore. Lori,
good luck with that. How's that working for you?
That was kind of a nice note to end on, so I'll hold my question.
No, go ahead and ask. If you have a question, you rated very
please.
Okay, okay. This is I don't quite know how to frame it. It's kind of a question of whose right is it. So I work with a wonderful group of people. I don't think anybody's prejudiced, but implicit biases run deep, and other people, it's a nursing unit. Other people come in. It's obvious to me if there's like some blatant thing going on that I need to step in and say, if a patient says, that blankety blank nurse can't take care of me, I need to say, in our hospital, that's, not appropriate. But there are other times where we're having a discussion, or maybe it's subtler, and there's a bunch of BIPOC nurses, and I'm like, should I be in this conversation? Because this is really these other people's, I don't want to say thing to be talking about, but that's, so I'm just not sure. Yeah. Like who owns it enough to bring it forward and speak about it? So I'm really interested in, like, Mary and Candace, your idea about that. Me as a white person just busting in there.
I just believe it's everybody's personally. And I believe that also you have to pick and choose your battles, because you can't be everywhere doing every single thing. And for me, DEI, when George Floyd, that incident happened, for the first time in my life, I said, I will no longer argue, complain, be mad and upset and not do anything. I want to be part of the change. Prior to that, I'd complain and cry and be upset. And then, 2 months later, it was old news and I move on. Then something else happened. I never did anything. And I think for each one of us, something on the inside of you will wake up and shake you into action. But ultimately, it's every human being's responsibility. And that's my personal opinion. It's every human being's. Mickey, I'd love to hear your opinion.
I think we're all in this together. What I have heard is, I have heard white people who are in the Black Lives Matter, and I have heard, and Candace, just a second, I will make this short, and I've heard Black people who say you don't have a right to an opinion, and you need to just keep your mouth shut. And I think that a lot of white people then are like, well, what can we do? Because we don't want to, it is not about assuming somebody else's, it's not about appropriation. And I agree with Candace about advocacy, because that's how I see myself as a nurse. I used to say at the VA, I'm like the mama cow. Don't get in front of my calf unless the calf is doing fine, and then I become an encumbrance. But I think I think we're all here in this together. And when we
Yeah.
see harm being done by nonverbal, by verbal, by physical, we have to decide how we show up. And yet it is a touchy thing because I want to be respectful as well. I don't want to step in somebody else's space. And I think that may have been what Lori was talking about, because I've heard that's none of your concern, or you don't have an opinion, you don't have a right to it. And Candace, I'm going to get right to you. I just want to ask if Mary has a comment about that, and then we want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I totally get it, especially when all of the things were going on with George Floyd. I had 15, 20 different white people. How can I help? What do I need to be doing? I don't know what my position should be. Because I can understand that kind of confusion, because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And I think, again, it goes back to conditioning. Some people have not done work on themselves, and they see every white person as an enemy. They don't see the person, the human being. And so for them, they separate everything, just like those people who hate Black people. So to me, it doesn't forward anything to tell somebody stay out of it, because it's a human problem, not a race. So again, the work that we do on ourselves, if we could learn not to judge, imagine that. Because if we didn't judge, we wouldn't have any of the problems that we face today. If we could just only learn to love, because that's what we're here for. In my humble opinion, we're here to learn to love. And so when we face different situations, is to say, is for us to see whether or not are we going to side with love or hate or judgment or anger, or everything is for our growth.
How are we going to show up, right?
Yeah.
Candace.
Lori, I wasn't sure what you meant when you said that you weren't sure you should bust into the group. So I don't know your role. Are you a manager, a supervisor, or I'm not sure the context of what you were asking. My position is that if you're in a leadership role formally, then you set the stage for how things are going to go. You bring the values of your agency, and if you don't align with those values, then that's the wrong place to be working. That's my bottom line for myself personally. And if you have a unit or a department or whatever your role is, you set the stage for how people will treat each other and what values drive that. So a question that I use internally as well as externally when I was a manager is, what value drove that decision to say this, to do this? What was the value behind that? Whatever it was, that's what I want to hear, because then we can talk about that. And is that a value that nurses should be embracing or not? And I think because I don't know if everyone on here is on this talk is a nurse or not. I think so, but I'm not sure, because I don't know any of you other than Mickey. I think this conversation we're having, which I really appreciate that this is a conversation, I think that nurses must be aligned with, we take care of all. We advocate for whoever needs it. We love all. We treat people according to, or we care for people according to what they need, different than what someone else needs. It is always individualized. And then sometimes it's a group working in the community too. But I think the word value is important to determine what is driving an action, a behavior, a decision. So I don't know if that answered, Lori, your should you bust into the group or not, but I think it depends on you and your style. And sometimes you are invited in, and sometimes you bust in.
I
Well,
guess I'm not a manager, and so it's more like in a situation of even with friends, like if I'm sitting around in a group of like BIPOC people, and they're talking about racism, bias, and I feel like the value behind my not speaking is respect, and what I'm internally, thinking is like, if I'm saying something, then these people are going to go like, hey, white girl, what do you know? And I do feel like that. I mean, like I did wake up around George Floyd and realize, as much as I've done work on myself for prejudice and all these other things, I really didn't get it.
yeah.
And so I feel like if I join in the conversation, I got to realize that I really don't get it even now. I have not experienced that. I have never been stopped by a cop.
Yeah.
That's a biggie though, Lori, to realize that those blinders are there, because we can't, and the reason the conversation corners were started was I realized that I have if all of us extend our arms out straight out from the shoulder blades, it's 180 degrees that we see. It means there's 180 degrees we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole idea of the conversation corners was to be able to have conversations about these issues so that our worldview expanded, and that we were able to understand where other people are coming from. Because how can we be holistic nurses and not welcome that, even when it's challenging or hard, embrace those differences, and best serve humanity if we picked out, well, I only work with females that are 20 to 30, that are blonde haired, blue eyed, that have no kinds of challenges, whether they're cognitive, social, emotional, physical. And so that's where the conversation corners were started. So I think that understanding that unknowing is critical to our growth. And Ellen is on. Mary Ellen Schultz has a comment or a question for you.
You're muted.
I'm reacting, Mary, to your statement. It's easy to speak up until it's time to speak up. And this is a personal experience, not a nursing experience. I was on a cruise with my family this spring, and I had just finished reading White Women, which was an eye-opener to me. But one of the many comments in this book is that white women support racism because we don't speak up when we have the opportunity. So on the cruise, our section of the ship had a wonderful housekeeper named Dorothy, and she went out of her way to get to know everyone. I think she knew my name the first day. She knew, which kids were my kids and grandkids. And so one day I was walking towards our room, and this couple, maybe in their 50s or so, very affluent looking. So I'm categorizing them, but you kind of get the picture. They were very well dressed, groomed, jewelry, etc. And the man walked up to Dorothy and said, "Well, Dorothy, there you are, my girl." And my immediate reaction was, she is not your girl. But I didn't say anything. And I just finished reading the book, and I totally understood that I should have said something, didn't quite know what to say. But when you made that comment, yeah, it's easy to speak up until it's time. And so I feel like I had a little forgiveness with your understanding of that, but it's like, we do need to speak up. Things don't change if you don't.
Yeah. And Ellen, I've been in situations where it was time for me to speak up and I didn't speak up either. To be a stand for somebody else, things that I've seen. I remember one time I was at an event that was a personal and professional growth event. And the lady was mad about George Floyd. And she was like, well, I'm supposed to just give up my white privilege. That's what she said. And then she turns and she looks at me, and it's just she and I and another man in the room. And the man is like uncomfortable because he's hosting it. And she was like, I mean, I just don't understand it, Mary. Why would I give up my privilege? That's what they're asking me, to just give up my privilege. Because I'm white, why would I give up my privilege? And I just looked at her and then I just turned back away. I wasn't going to engage in the conversation. It would have taken too long. And where we were starting from, and we're in this personal growth, and you would think we were further along in our development. And for her to say that, I knew she wanted to like pick an argument with me, and I didn't want to entertain it. So I didn't say anything. And in retrospect, it wouldn't have hurt. I've been on ski lifts, and when you get on I've gotten on the ski lift several times, and people will say to me, oh, I didn't know Black people skied. Things like that, and we absolutely do. And we have some of the best skiers in the world, things that I might make it fun and light and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, sometimes I don't say anything because I'm taken aback and I'm caught off guard, and sometimes I don't. And other times, this mouth of mine.
Well, Mary, you said you picked battles, and
Yeah.
I think that is where sometimes we look at it, and Ellen, I was sitting there thinking about Dorothy, and what could you say that wouldn't further humiliate her? I mean, or maybe cause her to lose a tip, or get her written up. And so, you're sitting there, and I know you have a son who has dark skin. So if anybody's going to speak up to try and help, I see it as you. But at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, how do you handle that? Other than, that person's not going to do anything but probably be toxic to Dorothy. So then it's one of those things where you're trying to figure out, how do I do no more harm? And, at the same time, I have had conversations with colleagues where, well, luckily, both of them, I was supervisors, the two that come to mind. And I was just like, if you can't show up professionally and give the care that is needed, then you can go home, period. Drawing a fine line. So Rhonda has her hand up, Mary.
I will say this, you're an exception to the rule, because
who is?
You are, Mickey. Because most people, we operate from a place of fear. And so, because that conditioning, again, most people, they want to say something, they're bothered, and they do not say anything.
I think we all have fear, Mary. I think that, that's normal. That's just a reptilian instinct. And I think that it's those little steps. And the other thing is, years ago, I lost a job over saying I wasn't going to have somebody sign and I was lucky. I was not a single mother. I didn't have to have the job. I could go out and clean houses, which I did when I left the hospital for a while. But it's that realization of, can I live with myself? Who do I answer to? Me and God. And so I think that that's one of the things that where we think about, is this a battle I'm going to fight? Because what are the repercussions of fighting? Like, I might be righteous, but in doing that, you might cause Dorothy more harm than just thinking, how disgusting is that person, right?
Yeah.
Rather than becoming part of that turmoil and that energetic connection that's not going to help anybody. And you have Rhonda on now.
Okay, so one other thing, because it just came to my mind. So, oftentimes I'll get in conversations with other Black people, and we're going back and forth. And what I say to them, those people who say, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, or it's not my battle. I'm just going to stay in my lane. I say, you know what, if it weren't for the people who came before us, because when I was growing up, and even before I was born, people were willing to die for what they believed in. And many people died so I could have the life that I have to this day. They gave up their life. And am I willing to give up my life? That's a hard question. I don't know. I don't know.
It comes back to the comment Candace made, which what value drove the words, the actions, the decisions of being really grounded and understanding what our values are and where we say, this is the line in the sand.
Yeah. I think Martin Luther King knew that that's why he was put here on the earth. And he knew that as a part of that, he was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I think, when I got my wake up call, it was for me to take some action. I didn't get that, okay, take an action until you die, be willing to die. I didn't get that. And I don't want to die. And I've been in some situations where I put myself in harm's way many, many times in the name of justice,
What's
right action.
Right action. Rhonda, it is 1:45. It's for everybody. The enthusiasm is amazing, and we'll see. I was going to say, let's plan to end about 7. But
Okay.
Rhonda, you're on.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm sorry about being late and not being on mute.
No apologies necessary, Rhonda, for anything.
Great conversation. Mine is more, I don't know, combination of comment, question, I guess. I work from home, and so I haven't been in like a clinic situation for, 3.5 years. And I guess I'm just curious, what has the shift been in the hospitals as far as, I don't like cultural competency, as that's what it was called. It's been so long since I've even stepped through one of those things in a clinical setting. If that's shifted to something, I don't know, in my opinion, that's more meaningful. And I bring that up because I went to a workshop, 2 weeks ago, and it was more, and Mary, you mentioned this, on implicit bias. And I think it was probably one of the most powerful workshops that I have ever been in, because it wasn't just someone talking, it was interactive, very much like this we're doing right now, with various conversations and people actually being pretty real about, biases that they've either struggled with in the past or maybe current biases. So we were talking about communication, and you had talked about implicit bias, Mary, and I was just curious of what shift has happened. Hopefully there has been some kind of shift as far as how this is being acknowledged in like clinical settings. And you may have covered this earlier, and I apologize.
No, we didn't cover it. And I don't know that I'm the best person to ask, but I will say the more things change, the more they stay the same. And it's also been my experience that when it comes to organizations, they dot their I's and cross their T's, and that's what they're concerned about, not affecting change. And that's on all levels, not just racism. And quite honestly, when AHNA reached out to me about the racial healing circles, I said no the first 3 times. I said, I can't play that game. If we're not going to get on there and have real talk and deal with real issues, I don't want anything to do with it. You don't need a black face. 3 times they reached out to me. And when I saw that they were serious, I was all in. But I didn't believe it because I've been on boards and where it was just all a facade. So I'm not the best person to answer that question because I work from home. I have my own business. Anybody here?
One of the things that I've heard, Mary, from people who are at the hospital bedside is maybe it's not better yet, but now it's obvious. And now I'm looking at all the research that's being done on, the maternal mortality. And what is it, 1 to 4? You're 4 times more likely to lose a baby or die in childbirth if you're Black. I think that I want to say the facade has been pulled off, and the conversations are happening now. And it was like after the Civil War, the North had as much bias and prejudice as the South did, other than some individuals. It just was deeper.
Yeah.
And it wasn't blatant. And so what I'm hearing from people that are involved in hospitals and involved in committees is the conversation has started. And that's where it always starts.
Yes.
Because if you can't acknowledge that it's going on, when you don't acknowledge that it's going on, you can't have a conversation. You can't make changes that will get a different outcome. Teresa got her hand up.
Yes, real quick. This just came to me, and it was not a planned thing. It came out of my mouth one day. I was at the grocery store. A woman, a Black woman, was opening the door for me. And she was like, my father's 94. I mean, she's a frail little thing, and she's opening the door for me. And I thought, oh my God. So I said, no, come on. She goes, no, it's okay. And I could tell that she didn't feel right having me hold the door. And I said, ma'am, you have been holding doors for white people for centuries. It is time for us to hold the door for you. Tears came to her eyes. And she went through and she said, thank you so much. God bless you. And it just came out. And so I think my point is that sometimes just words, simple words like that, and it wasn't anything I planned, the words just come out. And so I found myself doing that more often because that's true. That's really true. For centuries, Blacks have been holding doors open. I grew up in the North. I live in the South now, and it's just different. And so, I think it's those little things that can help, that maybe can help us come back together and be together, and hopefully just be one color. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Lisa has something in the chat. Looks really good. Lisa, you mind unmuting?
Hello, Mary.
Hello. Thank you for being here.
Oh, and thank you. This is amazing conversation. So you want to read what I wrote? And then if you want to ask any questions, I'm not sure.
Okay, it says, Mary mentioned this several times, and I do believe that change has to occur on an individual level first. We need to work within our being and heal all of our own judgments, negativity toward ourselves before we can expect any change outside of us. I understand that working within is not easy, but it's where change begins. You're my hero.
I wholeheartedly believe that. We can do the talk, we can say the right words, but ultimately the change isn't going to happen. Like you said, we keep trying, but it just keeps being the same thing. That's because we're not working within ourselves. We're not looking within ourselves.
Yeah.
I think
that's it right there. She summarized this whole evening. so much better than I could have.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think I just reiterated.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
And thank you, Mary.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes we want to just take this big bite and it's just the little bitty chunks that we need. And my dad said it best. He's 89, he'll be 90. And he said, I was complaining because it wasn't fast enough. And he says, well, Mary, I've seen a lot of things that I never thought I'd live to see. And you have to understand that each generation moves the needle forward. And it takes a long time to make mass changes. But if I look at my life and I look when I was born to now, it's significant. That's what he
Mhm.
said. It's
Yeah,
change happening. It's hard for us to see it because it's baby steps.
right. And I think we're all feeling it. And I think a lot of us are doing that inner work, but until everybody recognizes that it has to start within us, that's when we're really going to see the major shift. And
Yes.
that's what I think that's our purpose. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Mm, thank you.
Well, you all, thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts and ideas and just being open to the conversation. It just makes my heart just smile. And I'm just so honored to be in this group and be associated with people that are like-minded and really want to affect change. We can do it. We can. And Mickey, I really thank you for being the brain behind all of this and saying, yes, it's time. And I'm going to be the person to bring this forward. And I just thank you for always being the one to speak up in the silence and now not allowing things to continue on and just doing whatever you can to help. But ever since I met you, you were that type of person for me and your mom too. It was just something about you. Have you ever met somebody and you say it's just something about that person?
You
That's
mean
who you are
trouble?
for me.
Trouble. That's good trouble. Good trouble. You know, Mary, the graciousness of your words is overwhelming to me because I think that we are all in this together and we don't know. You said earlier words are important, and I think that we have to be intentional and conscious and intentional and present with words we use because they take us down different paths.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I keep hearing from those of you who pay my salary, which is all our certificates, and that is we got to walk the talk. And I think that we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I mean, my mom said if we didn't, then why would we need to be here, right? If we had it perfect, we wouldn't have to go through and do what we need to do. But we make mistakes, and I think you commented about accountability and responsibility. And I just keep thinking as holistic nurses, how can we not be accountable? How can we not be responsible? And I commented in the chat that unconditional, I agree with you. I think we're here to love and learn to love. And it's about unconditional acceptance. And that doesn't mean we accept bad behavior, but there are no throwaway people.
Yes.
And that with that said, this is recorded for those who want to go back and listen. For those who have stuck through, I'm going to make sure the certificate comes out with a space because this is a 2-hour continuing competency. I think everybody should win on it. Your time is valuable, but I think what's more valuable is the space we've created and the knowledge we've gained from each other. So are there any other questions before we close? Mary, you get me every time we're right here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And if you're wondering what is that one action you can take, it might be referring a colleague or a friend to this conversation corner. It's painless and it's easy and it brings perspectives. And thank you, bottom of my heart, for sharing all the stories because none of us understand what you or Candace or anybody has experienced. And when we make that assumption, we go down the wrong path. Mary, thank you for an amazing discussion. Thank you, Mary, outstanding. Yes, I will refer. You are loved and greatly appreciated by all of us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Namaste to all of you and a good evening. And again, Mary, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sheikah, Rhonda, Teresa, Ellen, Lisa, all of you for being here. You added a lot to the conversation, and we thank you.
Yes.
Somehow
Mary?
I can't remember.
Mary, thank you for staying on with us.
Yes.
And Rhonda, congratulations on that doctorate.
Oh, thank you.
I know that is a monster to get, and don't let anybody get that monkey off the back.
Right?
People will say, oh, somebody said to me after I got my doctorate, oh, now I know who you are. I knew you wouldn't stop until you had doctor before your name. And I had to laugh because I used my title when my students couldn't get their books, because that doesn't define me.
I know that's right.
You know, Rhonda, it's a huge amount of work, and you should be celebrating.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
You are most welcome. And a good night to everyone.